Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee this morning. Would like to my name is Mahalia France-Meir, Councillor for Moortown and Meanwood. I'm here today. I'll be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the council's website so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. I will now invite members and officers to introduce themselves, and as we go along, we'll start on my left and we'll go along, start with Kate. Thank you.
I'm Kate Sadler, Principal Corporate Governance Manager and Lead Officer to the committee.
Morning, John Garvani, Councillor Horsforth Ward.
Councillor Jane Dowson, Councillor Chapel Allerton Ward.
Good morning, Isaac Wilson, Councillor for Wheatwood Ward.
Good morning, Karen Bruce, Ardsley and Robin Hood Ward.
Morning, Chair, Rebecca Roberts, Legal Officer.
Good morning, Tim Rollett from Council's Intelligence and Policy Section.
Good morning, Jonathan Foster, Senior Head of Internal Audit, Corporate Governance and Insurance.
Good morning, Angela Laycock, Head of Finance, Internal Audit.
Good morning, Julia Brannan, Internal Audit Manager.
Good morning, Brendan McLaughlin, Senior Audit Manager.
Good morning, Ryan Glennon, Senior Audit Manager.
Morning, Andrew Byram, Interim Chief Digital Information Officer.
Good morning, Sandeep Gatore, Information Governance Manager.
Morning, Mary Hasnip, Head of Finance in Corporate Financial Management.
Good morning, Richard Ellis, Deputy Chief Officer, Financial Services.
Morning, Suzanne Hopes, Core Business Transformation Programme Manager.
Morning, Victoria Bradshaw, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, Perminda Sethi, Grant Thornton, External Audit.
Good morning, Linda Wild, Independent Member.
Matthew Robinson, Leeds City Councillor for the Harewood Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Chesterfield, Middleton Park Ward.
Good morning, Conrad Hartbrook, Councillor for Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, Elizabeth Gott, Corporate Governance Manager.
Good morning, Debbie Oldham, and I'm Clerk to the committee.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item agenda 1.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of a document. Agenda item 2, there are no exempt items. Agenda item 3, there's no formal late items. However, there has been supplementary information in relation to agenda item 9, and that was the draft statement of accounts for 2023-24. This was the unaudited draft figures, which you should have received. And agenda item 13, the governance arrangements to support the core business transformation programme. And this was just a reformatted version of the original report. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests? And I take silence as there are none. And agenda item 5, we have no apologies this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are the minutes from the last meeting held on 24th of June, are they true and correct? Yep. Oh, thank you very much. I'll take silence as a yes. Any matters arising or anything further?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm there were no matters arising from the June meeting.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item agenda 8, Internal Audit Annual Report. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. So just to set the context for this, the public sector internal audit standards require the Chief Audit Executive, which is the role occupied by myself, to deliver an annual opinion and report that can be used by the Council to support its annual governance statement. And the interim annual governance statement is on the agenda later on today. So the report sets out through Appendix A the independence of the service in alignment with the Audit Charter, which we did bring to committee earlier in the year. And it also substantially supports the work undertaken over the year which forms the basis of my annual opinion on the framework of governance, risk management and control arrangements. So, as detailed in section 3 of Appendix A, I provided a satisfactory opinion for the year based on the audit work and assurances that are outlined in that report. I think it's really important to state, particularly in a year like this, that opinion requires really careful consideration and is something that I've agonised over and given a lot of thought to in applying that professional judgment this year. There is an argument to say in local government, given the challenges that we face, that it's almost the easy option sometimes in a year like this to give a limited opinion on the control environment. But in actual fact, what we've seen at Leeds is a real doubling down of the effort to identify the pressures in the areas of heightened financial risk and to bring the right people around the table to work out what the controls need to be to get on top of that. And I think we also need to obviously distinguish sometimes the financial outcomes, particularly in the areas of high demand, from necessarily the control environment itself. So over the course of the year, I have taken a great deal of confidence from the fact that internal audit are brought around the table to contribute across the various boards, committees and functions that are set up to get on top of the control environment and to try our best to address that financial challenge. And I think this has come out over the course of the year in the work presented to the committee by Angela in her role through the many update reports that we've provided over the year. And it's also summarised in some detail at Appendix C of the report. But staying in Appendix A for now, sections 4.30 to 4.36 go through our recommendation tracking information. So that's a process that we have continued to develop and evolve over the year. And we've done so on the back of constructive challenge from this committee in terms of how we go about that process and the information we present. And what we've seen over the course of the year, and I hope will be recognised, is increasing transparency over that position and also a reduction in the number of recommendations that have stayed overdue for longer periods. And those that are listed in the graphical information in the report, which have been overdue for more than the 3-month period. The majority of those, we are actually undergoing follow-up reviews in those areas at the moment of adults and health, which will give us the assurance over the progress that's made and give us the opportunity to independently challenge the actions that are taken in those areas and consider any future recommendations that are required. Moving on at this point to Appendix B. So this summarises information in respect of our resourcing position and the activities that are underway to support the continual improvement of our own section. And it provides the committee with the assurances on the arrangements that we have in place to deliver our work in accordance with the appropriate standards. So whilst it is fair to recognise the service has undergone some considerable change during the period, including my own leadership, we have sought to ensure that the fundamental building blocks for our work in terms of those quality assurance procedures are still in place. And we have a robust quality assurance improvement programme which we share transparently with the committee and which is included in the report at Appendix B. We have continued to receive positive feedback through the questionnaires that we issue at the conclusion of each audit. And we've also, at the year end, requested additional feedback from the senior management team across the authority. We've balanced a cross-section of comments in the report from that, which demonstrate the respect that there is for our service, but also openly demonstrate the suggestions and nudges in the right direction, I feel, of continuing to raise the profile and boost the profile of internal audit across the authority. And that's something that we will be continuing to do over the course of the next year. So finally, I'd just like to take this opportunity in presenting the annual report to thank the Chair and thank all of the members of the committee for that constructive challenge that we've received over this period. It is very much welcomed by the authority and by ourselves as a function to drive continual improvement, and I think we've seen that over the year. I'd also like to take the chance to thank officers across the authority for the engagement in the internal audit process. And obviously our whole team for the work that's undertaken to lead me to be able to deliver this opinion. So we do have members of our management team here today, but there is a team behind that as well that have worked tirelessly this year to deliver that opinion in what is a tough role to get underneath risks and controls in areas of specialism across such a vast authority. But I take confidence from the work that we've undertaken in delivering this opinion, and I'm happy to take questions as far as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And I just want to second everything that you've said about the hard work that the team has delivered over the last year in delivering what they've had to do. So thank you very much. I'm just going to ask a quick question, if you don't mind, then we'll move on to other questions. It has been a tricky time. There's been a fall in resources. How can you continue to ensure that the team that is enough to continue what they're doing in carrying out the auditing of the work?
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a fair question. And again, in the report in Appendix B, we've been open about the fall in resources over the year, but I think it's important to say that that's not out of step with the wider authority and the resourcing position in the authority. It is my role to be able to state that we have sufficient resource to be able to deliver the audit plan, and I am able to give those assurances through this report. And sometimes it's not about always asking for additional resource, but looking at different ways of doing things. So over the course of the last few weeks, we've worked closely with the risk management function led by Tim to do quite an in-depth review of our strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats as a section, and to identify the risks to delivering that opinion with reduced resource. And what we're trying to come out with from that, and what we've had really good engagement with the team, is different ways of doing things. So looking at some of the time stoppers and the blockers within the process. I think reporting can always be a challenge for internal audit functions and clearing reports. And also, as I mentioned, reaching out for that engagement, strengthening our protocols of action with departments, and looking at more flexible ways of delivering the assurances through that through the course of the year. So ultimately, we're able to do more with the resource that we have rather than asking for more resource in the position we're in. So I am satisfied with what we have and confident that with that continual improvement of the section, we do have enough to be able to provide the assurance over the key risks that we face over the year.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dowson.
Yeah, it's just that old chestnut. I wonder if you could just go through what's happened over the last 12 months with regard to cyber risks. It's quite topical, isn't it, at the moment?
Thank you, Councillor Dowson. The authority spend a substantial amount of money on our strength in depth and security. We are going through the CAF scheme at the minute, which is a new scheme that's been set up for local government to do cyber assurance framework. So we applied for that very early on and got £20,000 worth of funding. So we're going through that at the minute with the team. We do our PSN submission every year, which we were again successful with this year. But it's an ever-present problem, cyber. There's huge organisations that have been hit. The recent CrowdStrike issue, by the way, was not a cyber issue. That was something different. I'm certainly not complacent. We're constantly trying to keep ahead of it, but it's an ever-present problem. Something that the scrutiny board I went to last week, we talked about maybe briefing members privately. I can go through some of the assurances we're putting in place, and I'm happy to open that offer up again to yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we will definitely look at a briefing with members for that. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Is it you again? Councillor Dowson.
At 4.27, you've got a line in there about the education, health and care plans. And it's, I suppose, just satisfying us that you're satisfied that everything is in place to make sure that we can do those in a timely fashion and we have the right funding in place to do that.
I'll take that question. In terms of the education, health and care plans, we are involved in a number of different forums that are working through improving the process and working through some of the issues around that. And I think we have enough of involvement in that to provide the check and challenge that's needed around ensuring that we do have the right processes in place. We have got the right funding, the right people, and the right skills around the table to work with that and address that challenge, which is a national challenge across the country, actually, around EHCPs and SEND in general.
Would you like to come back on that? Got another question. I'm going to see if there's any more questions on to my right. Linda?
Thank you. On page 4.7, no, sorry, paragraph 4.7, page 27. I like the table that links the assurance to you've got your assurance themes there. And I may have asked this question before, apologies if that's the case. What I really like to see, and I don't know whether other members would agree, would be in your annual report, a reminder for members as to what risks you have covered as part of your assurance plan. I mean, ultimately, we want to make sure that the risks are being assured in a coordinated way. It links to the assurance mapping that I know you're working on as well. But I wonder whether it would be quite helpful to see how your plan is aligned to that. Just a reminder, I know you do that in your planning stage. So you're looking forward as to what risks you're going to cover. Would it be quite helpful to see which risk, how the risk translates into the annual report at the year end as well?
I think it would. I think that's a fair comment, Linda. So thank you for that. And it is something we have discussed before. I think we are increasingly working closely with the risk function throughout the year as well to discuss the changes in risk. Now, I think we've tried to present that through the update reports, particularly when we discuss changes to the plan and the rationale behind any change in our auditing activity and the links between that and the change in risk profile. I think moving forward, reflected on your request there, which again I do think is fair. When you look at this sort of table of the assurance themes, we are substantially changing the content of the regular updates that we provide. For the first one of those that will be due later in the year, and I think that's an opportunity for us to build in that more standardised, if you like, risk information into the report that draws on the links between what we're doing and the corporate risks and the directorate risks that we face.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dowson?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's listening, the council have some absolutely fantastic traded services, especially to schools. Do we audit the traded services? And on top of that, there's obviously an internal market. Whilst we're told we don't work in silos, different departments do have budgets, quite rightly, and they're accountable for their budgets. But one of the big complaints about council services is they're very expensive compared to the general market. So do we ever audit our internal department to departmental services?
Yes, we do reviews of our traded services. They're included within our areas for audit as part of our risk-based plan. We've done a number of different areas in the last 12 months. We've looked at fleet services, we've done work in Leeds building services, and we'll do other pieces of work as required across the piece. In terms of the commercial, I think there's a commercial arm within procurement, so procurement and commercial services, and they're working closely with traded services, looking at that issue of around the value for money aspect of the service.
Just come in. There is an understanding that internal traded services, when you compare with the external market, do appear to be expensive. However, you have to take that in the round, and this is something that we are working on around sharing and understanding, that because we do have internal services, we have terms of conditions for those staff, and therefore they're all in the West Yorkshire Pension Fund. They get the same terms and conditions as us, and that was one of the reasons why we've kept a lot of the internal services in-house, so that the staff get good terms of conditions around like sickness, etc., holidays, and that does add an overhead onto the cost of providing those services. But what I would say is that there's an awful lot of work going on within each of those service areas to make sure that we do undertake value for money assessments of them. So we're looking at performance, productivity, quality assurance, and then we are doing comparisons with the private sector and looking at how we can improve. And those reviews are underway at the moment.
If I can just come back quickly on that, and it is several years ago now, but we had an internal quote for a new kitchen for one of our community centres that came in at £18,000. A large furniture manufacturer and provider who fit kitchens gave us a quote of 8,000. That's a huge difference, and I suggest that's more than just pensions and so on and so forth. And I probably still have the email, so if you did want to look at that, we could do that. But the real question is, you said as required. The other lady said as required. So what would bring that into force? What is as required?
Well, it would be if we were asked to by the service, if they had particular concerns, we would look at whether or not we could provide assistance around that. Also from our colleagues in counter fraud, there may be things that come through via that channel where we would want to do some additional assurances around the controls in relation to the allegations or the inquiries that have come in. So it would generally be looking at what we've been asked to do, and it's part of our being more flexible, our more flexible plan, and looking at how we can get specific assurances to support the annual opinion without having to do necessarily a full end-to-end review.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm keen to find out a little bit more within the report where it says satisfactory, what the next level up is and how long you feel it would take under the current resource to be able to get there. Because operate on basis, there's no new money. Can we move towards good?
No, fair question, and probably something on reflection that I should have made clear within the report. It's quite a binary choice in this opinion between satisfactory or a limited opinion or a no assurance opinion. And that tends to be the way of operating with an annual opinion that's given. So there isn't a next stage up that we would be aspiring to. The judgment really is from the work that we've undertaken. Are we satisfied on those assurances that the control environment, the governance, the risk management arrangements are well established? Or is there something that we need to bring to the committee's attention, which is either around the breadth and depth of the coverage that we've been able to undertake to assure ourselves, or something substantially material in the control environment that would change that opinion from satisfactory to limited or bring that caveat in. So it isn't that we're working to the next stage up, that's how the annual opinion is delivered, and that is consistent with internal audit functions across local government.
That works for me, that's fine. We're happy with the current budget and working towards it, that's good. I've been looking, Chair, where else this next question would fit within the agenda, and I can only think it's in this item, but it might not be yourself that responds to it, so please stick with me. Last week the Chancellor suggested that they would be looking into the COVID grants, and the COVIDs are to go back over old accounts. That would suggest that we're going to go back to local authorities because we received a number of grants, and that might reopen some audit work that we've done previously. Do we have capacity to be able to do that? Because that could be a hugely sizable piece of work.
I think we'd need to take a steer on what that request is. I mean, if something like that comes in as a statutory request, then we do need to create that capacity to address that. What I would say is COVID grants are something that we have covered over recent years alongside the service that issued those grants as well. I think there's a 3-step chasing process for anywhere there are question marks before they go back to central government. And I think we're almost at the cusp of having addressed everything that there is or was for us to address. I think we need to take stock and then take a steer on any future request that there is, and then address that within our own capacity. There is obviously in the authority, it isn't just ourselves that would be able to provide assurance over that. So we'd have discussions with the service depending on what that request may be. But anything that comes in with that, obviously, as a council, it's our duty to respond accordingly.
I suppose not a question for the, oh, sorry.
Sorry, just bear with me a second. Victoria wanted to come in.
Thank you. I would just add that when we got the COVID grants and the allocations that were made from those grants, there was a very robust monitoring process around those, and there was a lot of returns that we had to do, which at that time had to be verified by myself. So for me to get that assurance, there are a number of controls that are put in place by the teams that they know they have to go through to check that they're accurate. So if we were asked to provide any evidence on the work that had been undertaken, it will be there. So I'm not expecting it to be more onerous than what we've already got. Thank you.
Probably not a question for the officers, but for us as a committee then, just to keep a watching eye to see how this develops. I would hope, and I'm fairly reassured from what Victoria's said, that if it's please see our previous reply as of 2021, then that's enough for the government, then fine. But I've got a concern that it might be we're opening this all up again, and that puts a huge pressure on these officers.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Hartbrook.
Thank you, Chair. First one that was just a comment, but I've got a question on the report. Picking up on Councillor Dowson's thing about the value of internal versus outsourced services, and picking up on what Victoria Bradshaw said about thankfully we pay good rates, we have good pensions, etc. However, the bit that we didn't mention is within our internal services, there isn't the same profit expectation that exists in the private sector. And I personally would hope that that goes a large way to offsetting and enabling that we should be able to deliver in-house in comparable cost effectiveness to the best of the externally sourced. I agree with Councillor Dowson that often that doesn't seem to be the case anecdotally, in that we often do get kind of expensive quotes through for various jobs that happen in our communities, but that's perhaps not for this committee, it's perhaps for individual areas. Going back to the report, 4.32, page 34, looking at the table, which is a really good table, kind of visually highlighting areas of concern, and it's one that stood out for me because I am on the adult and health board. There's a lot of outstanding actions, urgent action, high priority actions in the 6 to 12 month area. Just wondered whether any commentary could be given on that, and whether there's any particular areas that need focus or actions.
No, thank you. Those that are outstanding in adults and health are the ones that I referred to in the presentation where we're undertaking follow-up work. So I think one of those follow-up audits is substantially complete, where we, and I think it's probably fair to say to him, in both of the cases of these audits, we have been able to substantiate progress that's being made there. We're in the process now in one of them of making any residual observations and recommendations that we require. The other follow-up audit is just on the cusp of starting at the moment, but it gives us that opportunity to look at that area again, see what any of the blockages are to completing that progress, and then consider any future recommendations around that. But in both of those areas, we have seen that there has been some progress at least made there, just not to the extent that's enabled the full sign-off of the recommendations yet. And they lend themselves obviously to that follow-up audit, which adds the rigour of that challenge into them. The outcomes of those audits, as with all audits, will then be summarised to the committee in the future follow-up reports, so we'll be able to give further assurance on those.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No? Okay, are we happy with the recommendations that are set out in the report, including the offer of a briefing to members and the recommendation made by Linda? We're happy? Take that nod as agreement. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item agenda 9, Grant Thornton draft statement of accounts.
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the draft statement of accounts for 23-24, which at this stage in the process are approved by the Chief Finance Officer and are brought to the committee for information. They'll then be audited by Grant Thornton. We're expecting that audit to start in late October after the audit of the 22-23 accounts has concluded. Once the audit process is concluded, the final audited accounts will be brought back to committee, and it'll be at that stage that the committee are asked to approve them on behalf of the council. These draft accounts were approved on the 14th of June, and that is 5 weeks earlier than we approved the 22-23 statements of accounts, but it's still not within the new statutory target date of 31st of May. However, looking at the national position, the published figures were that only 41% of councils nationwide achieved 31st of May this year. So we're in the majority, and we don't anticipate there being any adverse consequences for not meeting that 31st of May date. The public inspection period started on the 17th of June and ran for 6 weeks, concluding last Friday. During that period, we did receive contact from 2 members of the public, both asking excuse me, the same combined public inspection query to us and objection to Grant Thornton. From the council's point of view, we will be responding with the documents requested to those members of the public fairly shortly. Turning to the accounts themselves, I would like to highlight again the IAS 19 pensions position. There has again been an increase in the pensions asset for the West Yorkshire Pension Fund, to the extent that we've actually got a positive statutory pensions reserve, which is very unusual. That's never happened before. But I think it's important to stress that that doesn't have any impact immediately on our pensions contributions. The pensions position on the balance sheet is very much a snapshot at a point in time. It's affected by current economic conditions, and it does tend to be quite volatile. Whereas the pension contributions are set based on the triennial actuarial reviews, which are forward-looking and take a more long-term view, so they tend to sort of iron out all the peaks and troughs that you get. Also, just to mention that our overall level of spendable reserves did reduce in comparison to the previous year, particularly in terms of earmarked reserves. That was partly as a result of planned use of reserves, but also of the need to use earmarked reserves to balance the outturn position. I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions members have on these accounts, but just to say that we will hold an informal briefing session on these accounts in the new year before the committee are asked to approve them, so we can go into figures in a lot more detail at that stage. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to come in on Grant Thornton? No? Okay. Councillor Dowson.
Yeah, firstly, I don't know if I should have declared an interest in the pension side as a pension fund pensioner, but if I do, then then I am. So we've gone from being sort of a bit on the naughty step to doing quite well, and with 41% of the previous ones done, we're still not there. It would be nice to actually shift us over, so we are actually in the percentage that are up to speed. And I know it's really difficult, you know, being what we're the second largest authority outside London. It's a big beast, isn't it, to audit? So, but if there's anything you can suggest that could be done to actually try and just tip us over, so we are in that 41% or more. But the other thing is, really, I'd like Grant Thornton just to assure, because one of the issues was previously that you weren't getting information in a timely fashion to allow you to do the work that you did. So I'd just like some assurance that you actually now have the communication going in the right direction and you are getting things in a timely fashion.
Thank you for that question. So we're currently undertaking the 2022-23 audit, and there has been a marked improvement in the turnaround of queries and information requests. So we're currently on track with that. And if that continues and there are no issues coming out from the work that we're undertaking, we hope to be able to conclude our work by the end of September, which would then put us on a good footing for 2023-24, which Mary mentioned would sort of start later in October. With a view to getting that completed as soon as possible early into the new year. And that would then put Leeds back on to a sort of a normal timeline. He would have caught up. But inevitably, there's a lot of work yet to do. But to answer your question specifically, there has been certainly a marked improvement in the timeliness of responses and the information that we're being provided with.
Thank you very much. Are there any other further questions? No, okay, thank you very much. Are we happy with the recommendations set out in the report? Yep, brilliant. Moving on to item agenda 10. Grant Thornton, audit risk assessment inquiries.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first document relating to the 23-24 audit process. And it lists the officer's proposed responses to Grant Thornton's management inquiries, which cover areas including governance, arrangements to counter the risk of fraud, legal issues, as well as compliance with some accounting standards. So the questions asked are the same as the questions that were asked in relation to 22-23, which were presented at the June meeting of the committee. The proposed answers have been updated by officers, but there are no significant changes to bring to members' attention. So myself and other officers present will be happy to answer any questions members have in relation to those.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. We're happy with the recommendations set out in the report. Yep. Okay, moving on to item agenda 10, the interim annual governance statement. Sorry, we're item agenda 11, sorry.
Whichever number it is, it's the interim annual governance statement that we're on. It's the version that's been published together with the accounts for the period of public inspection. There have been no issues raised in relation to the annual governance statement during that period. The statement itself is massively reduced in length from previous years, members will notice. And that is partly because it now stands on the shoulders of other pieces of work. So it stands on the shoulders of the corporate governance framework and assurance plan that was received at the June meeting. And the response to the 2023 action plan is now included as a separate appendix within the report that you've got today, showing the outcomes of those actions from last year. The 2024 actions are included at the back end of the interim annual governance plan and will be updated together with the statement itself prior to being brought to committee for approval in the autumn time. So we will update the interim statement with things like the internal audit annual opinion that you've received today, with reference to the joint strategic need assessment, which was published in July, to make sure that it's up to date, but also that it reflects the assurance statements that we've received from specialists and the outcome of the survey of internal control, so that the full assurance environment is reflected in the actions to be taken forward. And those actions will very much reflect what is required to ensure that the authority is able to deliver its strategic outcomes with the resources available to the authority within the framework that we now stand and the environment that we now stand in. So this is the interim. It's the version that has been published, but it will be updated.
Are there any questions? Any members? Councillor Dowson.
It's our pack, page 125, with regard to ombudsman. I used to work in a customer service environment, and you receive far more complaints than you do compliments. It's just the nature of the beast, isn't it? I'm just wondering, do we look? I'm sure we do look at the ombudsman requests and so on. Is there a pattern to these? Is there anything you feel that that needs to be done to ensure that we get fewer ombudsman requests?
What I would say, Councillor Dawson, in response to that is we are in the process of carrying out an internal audit of the council's complaints process at the moment. As you'll be aware, there is that three-step complaints process where any that escalate from the officer response then go to the ombudsman. So it gives us that opportunity to provide some assurance on the organisational learning that comes out of that, and my own experiences with that process are that where there is an ombudsman judgment, that is shared with the relevant officers and the services that need to know about that, so there can be that reflection on the control environment and anything that we need to consider and address on the back of that. So I am confident in saying that those mechanisms are in place through any ombudsman judgments, but again, it's something that we are providing some further independent assurance on, and the outcomes of that will again come through in the update reports on our work that come through to committee over the course of this year.
Just to you, Chair, whether you feel it might be an item that we might want to look at, and that is the successful ombudsman complaints, and a review into what is required the council to do to make sure that they don't happen again. It may not be our remit, so.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Dawson. I'll take that recommendation on board. Thank you. Are there any further questions, Linda? Oh, sorry, Councillor Robinson.
So on page 133, at the bottom of the table, I'm always interested in partnership arrangements, as you probably remember from before. I can see that you carried forward those actions in relation to appropriate governance in partnership arrangements. Just a question, really. Given the financial climate, not just for councils, but for the private sector as well, are our Leeds' partnership arrangements increasing? Is the spend in partnership arrangements increasing? And if so, how can we be assured as a committee that the deferral of that action is appropriate, if that makes sense? Thank you.
I can't comment on the spend because I've not looked at those figures, and the Chief Finance Officer will do. The survey of internal control did look at partnerships and has given us insight. There is a need to look at proportionality in terms of the assurance in place on top of the working arrangements. The governance controls in relation to partnerships are exactly the same as every other control within the council. So there aren't special controls in relation to decision making for partnerships. It is the council's decision making controls. What's important is that it's understood what's ours to decide and what's our partners to decide, and how that works, how we understand who we're in partnership with, how we understand whether our partnerships are delivering against the outcomes that they were set up to deliver, etc., etc., etc. There is an ongoing conversation with corporate leadership team to look at what the most appropriate and proportionate assurance arrangements would be to deliver that appropriate assurance to yourselves. And that's happening over the summer. So we're just on the cusp of last year. It may be that we're able to put something in by the time that we get to the final version of the AGS. We might not quite be there and able to do that, but it is something that we are taking very seriously in terms of how we deliver that outcome assurance. What I can say is that the peer review which was undertaken, comments very favourably upon the partnership working that takes place in Leeds, and that it is a strength of the authority that we do this. So it's that not crunching one of our strengths by killing it with assurance, and it's making sure that that is proportionate. But I know that the Chief Finance Officer is desperate to say something.
Thanks, Chair. What I would say is Kate's concentrated on the governance and the controls in place around that, but there is a lot of work going on through the summer as part of the budget process, looking at our different partnerships, looking at the third sector, looking at how we can work more effectively with our partners in the third sector to drive out more value for money for our communities and the people that we serve. So that work, we've got a number of themes as part of the budget process this year. So we're not just looking, we call it rows and columns, we're looking at each of the individual services, and then we're looking at the themes that run through those. And one of those themes is around partnership and third sector working, to see how we can maximise that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's great to hear that you're being proportionate. The last thing that I would want you to do is to be over-egging the assurance pudding. You're right, I get that. I guess my nervousness, if I have to have one, is that this doesn't show us whether there is a significant increase or not. And my assumption was that there would be. It might not be the case. But if you're doing the financials and you're doing the governance, it's about bringing those two together to make sure that what we are spending is being appropriately assured. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Good part about letting Linda go first is that when she says something about partnerships and you've got a question about partnerships, you know you're on a good theme here as well. And on that, probably our most significant partnership is, or will be, I think, in the future with West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Others may say actually it's to do with NHS and other partners, but they have their own governance arrangements in place. Is there a feeling that it's better to try and start to seek alignment on governance with the combined authority, given the devolution deals, or actually have a look at a more differentiated approach and just say, well, actually, we're only interested in our own governance as opposed to what the combined authority, who will be a significant capital funder for the authority, would do?
Excellent point. I shall take it away and think about it. However, I know that West Yorkshire Combined Authority isn't vastly dissimilar to ourselves because of the way in which it was set up in the first place. So I don't think there are mass differences, but we have to acknowledge that the West Yorkshire Combined Authority is a separate and distinct authority, and therefore has to go through its own decision-making hoops and in the same way that we do. Yeah.
Thank you. Victoria.
Yeah, we're working with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority on their governance and assurance that they need around a lot of the funding that they receive that then comes through to the local authorities to deliver on those funding, and the level of assurance that we require to manage those schemes, and the assurance that I need to sign them off to say that we've spent the money in line with the requirements of the grant conditions and we've achieved value for money. And then for it to go through the WICA's assurance as well before it goes to central government. So we are working closely with them about how we refine it so that we get the assurance once rather than the double doing that we're tending to do at the moment. And I think that's what happens in combined authorities. So there is a lot of work going on with the West Yorkshire Directors of Finance to try and look at how we can streamline some of that.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Nope. Okay, are we happy with the recommendations made in the report? Yep. We're moving on to item agenda 12, which is the annual assurance report.
Right, apologies for any confusion. So the assurance report on decision making follows through the cycle of internal control and presents all the usual assurance that arrangements are up to date, fit for purpose, embedded and routinely applied. The performance indicators that we're working with show that we're back on track with our controls post-pandemic, when things necessarily fell off the control path. There are no concerns in relation to the reporting for this year. The interesting thing for members is the looking forward, noting that decision-making arrangements have been altered in order to give us more agility, less bureaucracy, free up officer time for making the decisions rather than recording the decisions. And over the next year, we'll be putting those plans in place, embedding them, monitoring them. The monitoring that's taken place in real time so far, so we've already looked at a couple of months. There's nothing yet coming out of that to indicate any concerns with applications of the new thresholds and so on and so forth. And there are plans in place for further review. And we will report all that excitement next year.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from any members? No, are we happy with recommendations in the report? Okay. Moving on to item agenda 13, governance arrangements to support the core business transformation. Suzanne.
Thank you, Chair. There's a report on the agenda that outlines the delivery framework and the governance arrangements to ensure that the programme is up to date, fit for purpose and is operating effectively and are routinely complied with. And the delivery framework's been designed to ensure that the decisions are in accordance with the standard best practice guidance and is aligned with the expert advice that we've been seeking from external consultants at all stages throughout the programme. That it aligns with the statutory and corporate requirements in relation to programme delivery and decision making, that we aim to achieve the aims and ambitions outlined in the business case, and that all options and recommendations are informed using robust sources of intelligence. And that includes internal subject matter experts and technical experts, experienced external consultants and other professional advisory services. And we're regularly touching base with other councils to learn lessons from them as well. So I'm happy to take any questions on anything that's in the report.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Are there any questions from anyone? No. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. I note at the top of page 185, there's a reference to audit data and equality assurance, and you mentioned the coverage of internal audit and the work that they do, rightly so, in a sort of in real time setting. I'm all for that. I guess my question is in relation to the undertakes assurance reviews on behalf of the chair, presenting assurance reports, etc. Are those deep dives? Are they deep dive internal audit reviews into specific parts of programmes? And if they are, what do they cover typically? And does the audit committee see any outcome from those reports?
Yes, I suppose they are deep dives. They're done quarterly, and they are included within the other audit work in our general update reports. To date, we've looked at things, we've looked at contract management, both in terms of the previous contractors and the contractors now. We've looked at support and maintenance going forward post implementation of the systems. Have we got the right support around the systems once we go live? I've got a report due in August, and we'll be looking at the arrangements for user acceptance testing. We've also looked at the change management arrangements, and we've also looked at the cost monitoring. Also within that, we do a high level analysis against our procurement gateways to ensure that we have complied with contract procedure rules where we've gone out to tender. And I also do an assessment against the Association of Project Managers. They've got a toolkit for assessing project management, and I do a high level assessment against that to ensure that we've got the right governance and control around the delivery of the project.
And just to add to that, obviously we do report that work takes place through the regular update reports. And I think consistent with all of the audit work that we undertake, where there are issues of significance or limitations in the assurance, we report some of the summary detail around that to committee in the interests of proportionality, where the assurances from the work that Angela and the team have undertaken are positive assurances on the arrangements in place. We tend not to go into detail of that more. It's simply a reference that the work has taken place. And I think we've discussed in the past through our reports, and again, standardising the means through which something that doesn't necessarily result in a formal assurance opinion, that we are consistent in the way that we apply that. But yeah, were there to be issues of significance from the deep dives and the work that Angela does, they would come through in the update reports that we provide.
Thank you. That sounds really comprehensive. Thank you. I guess what I'm still missing, maybe I'm not looking in the right place, forgive me, is from a time, cost and quality perspective, which is where my head always goes, programme management. It sounds like you're looking at the cost, you're looking at the quality. There's always the time element on that. I'm missing that, but it might be there and I'm not seeing it. So is there something about, is there an opportunity to perhaps do a plan on a page to say, this is what we're planning to deliver and this is what we've actually delivered? That sort of covers the time. I might be looking for too much and you might already have that. And as I say, forgive me if I'm not looking in the right place.
There is obviously project plans and high level timeline plans in place, and we can certainly come back and provide more information around that. That wasn't included in the report, but we can certainly provide that afterwards.
That's something we also do look at in terms of where we are within the project plan, and we do, if we think there are questions, ask around, do we think the targets are still achievable? Have we got all the right resources to do that? And also it's something that the programme board are very on top of, and we cover that by attending the programme board as well, so that we can ensure that that check and challenge around the timeline is also undertaken.
I think Appendix 1 gives you a very high on the different phases that we're undertaking. But what I would say is that we're monitoring it. We have the steering group on a fortnightly basis and the board on a monthly basis, and we're all over the timetable. So it's making sure that where we do know things are taking us longer, we're very keen on saying, well, we're quite straight saying we are not reducing the amount of testing we're undertaking. That is one thing we won't slip on, and we won't slip on the training. So the amount of resource that we're putting in there is quite significant to make sure that when it goes live, it'll land as mitigated everything that we can do. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. In the framework, it references the CBT business case as part of that. I'm new to this committee. I haven't seen that business case, but could you just explain what the outcomes are that the system will be measured against? Is it things like saving time on administrative tasks or reducing the cost of the system? Or it'd be good to know what those outcomes are, if that's okay. I have a second question, but I'll maybe do that after.
In the report, it outlines the aims and objectives. There's a diagram in there which is sort of underpins the business case. And there's a number of measures, I guess, that we'll be measuring success against. And it's really about providing more modern ways of working and more efficient ways of working. Our current systems, all in the scope of core business, are probably 10, 20 years old now and require a fair degree of offline working. So the more modern systems mean that we'll be able to work more efficiently and reduce the amount of duplicate effort and offline working that will manifest itself through staff savings times and just enabling staff to work more efficiently, which will then reduce the pressure, obviously with reducing resources on staff, but the work, in a lot of instances, the work levels are being maintained or sustained. It's really about enabling us in the first instance to reduce the pressures and enable people to work more efficiently and just create that capacity within the way that they work. And then in the longer term, it's about changing the platforms that will then enable us to continue to automate and digitise the way that we work and take advantage of new, more modern technologies in terms of automation, artificial intelligence, all these kind of new ways of working that will enable us to continue to streamline and the way that we work and achieve ongoing efficiencies in terms of staff time and staff effort and accuracy of data.
Thank you. So those goals seem quite clear. Will they be reducing duplicate effort and offline working and staff saving time and so on? Would those be, how do you sort of figure out that it's achieving those things? Would that be reflected in the test? You mentioned that testings are something you're absolutely not going to skip over. It's a really important part of the process. So would you be reflecting that in the testing? Are you looking at those as part of that? Is that part of your ways of working?
Can I just say that the core business transformation is not just about the solution, it's around the whole way that we work. And we've done a lot of around the processes that wrap around the systems that we use. And as part of that process analysis, we've looked at where we can automate those areas so that it will reduce the workloads of staff, because we are aware from the staff survey that it's not necessarily that we would reduce that staff resource in all areas, but it would mean that the workloads were more manageable. And we've tracked that through the business case to look at those areas where we're keying in 2-3 times the same data, where we touch it numerous times because it's paper based, etc. So Suzanne said it's not just about it's not just around the things that we've got here, it's around the making it more efficient and effective for staff, so that we do those reductions. Do you want to add to that?
I'm just going to go to Councillor Robinson and then come back to you, Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Dowson.
Thanks, Chair. Just referring to page 185 in the report, which is in the appendices there. Next to the key learning insights, it says the programme team also engaged with other councils, public sector bodies who had initiated or completed similar transformational programmes. And it lists some councils there, including Birmingham, gone bust, and Croydon, gone bust. How are we auditing the partners that we look to interact with to learn the lessons from? Because I would suggest that perhaps some of those partners there's maybe things that we don't want to do that those partners have done that we don't want to follow, but they aren't some of the best examples that would be in there. So who is an example of somebody who would be doing it brilliantly, which we should be looking to follow?
So there's 2 reasons why we contact councils for learning, and one of them is to learn what not to do. So a lot of the things were, what would you have done differently? And that then helps us build up the picture of what we want to do and how we manage it. And we're working with the consultants who've implemented Dynamics at another authority that's been implemented quite successfully, which was Bournemouth. What's Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole? Yeah, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. So, but we are working across all local authorities, because there's quite a few that are in either ahead of us at the same stage of us, or we're supporting them who are behind us, so that we're all working together to learn best practice. Because obviously it is a huge system. But what I would say, those two that you have highlighted, we did look at their reports and spoke to them around what would they do differently and how can we learn that. And one of the things that was coming out of that was the testing and the amount of time that you do around don't shorten it, because that's always at the end of the project, and that's always the risk, is to short your testing, shorten your training, and then you don't land it how you need it to be. So that is something that we've been really key on. Is there anything to add to that? Okay.
I think that's fair, and you can always learn lessons for where things go wrong, but I'm keen to make sure we're learning from the lessons from people who are doing it right as well, and making sure that they're listening there. So that's some reassurance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just building on my earlier question in a way, which is, I think my delivery partner for this is, I think in my report it says KPMG. Yeah. So, I guess my question really is about how much kind of control we have over that delivery. So if the testing, identifies problems or whatever, how much flex is in there? Do we have a very kind of like requirement heavy contract, which means that they can say, well, we've done this, and this, or can we say, well, actually, these are requirements we discussed, but we realize that's not, that's not getting the outcome we want, so we want to change it in this way. You mentioned sort of testing at the end of a project, but obviously most ICT projects, you don't want to deliver everything at once and then do lots of testing. That means all the risk is at the end there. So what's your kind of, in terms of that kind of governance, are you delivering in phases and sort of testing as you go, or what does the process look like there? And I guess a related question is just, you're saying you mentioned we're building the system that will allow us to then do more over time around our automation and things like that. Will we be reliant on an external partner to do that over time, or are we able to develop the in-house skills to do that kind of work over the long term? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll address them one by one, I think, if I can. So I think in terms of the contract arrangements with KPMG, it's a very iterative process in terms of the way that we've set the contract up is by essentially work package by work package. So it is staged. So we agree each stage of in each phase of the project, and then we agree with KPMG what that's going to look like in terms of what we want in terms of requirements, and then how they're going to resource that in terms of their consultants. And then that's mutually agreed. So we take it stage by stage as opposed to one big. Cause when you set off on these kind of projects, you don't really know at the outset what you're going to need until you lift the bonnet up and you start getting into the detail. So it's very much a staged, iterative approach with regular monthly contract management meetings to look at the next stage and what that's going to then look like in terms of their input. And certain stages, we might decide that we're going to, we have the expertise that we resource and just need support with KPMG. But then some phases, we might lean on KPMG more because of their experience and their expertise. So we take it stage by stage. In terms of testing, the overall programme, as in the report, is phased. It's phased over 3 years, and it's very much a modular approach. So in phase 1, we are focused on looking at replacing finance and replacing the HR payroll system. And then in phase 2, we'll be focusing on sourced contract. And then phase 3 is revisiting the learning and development and health and safety modules. So the programme as a whole is definitely phased. In terms of dynamics, we're going with what's called a minimum viable product, which means what must we absolutely have at go live in terms of a minimum product, rather than try and build absolutely everything, because again, you'd be into a project stage for a long time, and therefore it becomes costly and things change. So we're going with what's absolutely we must have from day one, which it will be based on everything that we've currently got and you know, what enhancements we can build in within the timescale that we've got. And then we'll continue to develop and improve that product over time. Which again de-risks it in terms of, you know, trying to go with too soon with too much. So then in terms of how we support that then, rather than be continually reliant upon external consultants. So initially we will need that support from some external consultants up to go live and beyond go live. But we were also working with our IDS colleagues to build that expertise and that capacity in-house. So we'll have in-house resources working hand in hand with those external consultants for that knowledge transfer and having some training plans in place, because it is new technology that IDS colleagues are needing to learn. So there's a training plan in place and a knowledge transfer plan in place. And then when we are confident that we have internal resources that can then take the baton then from the consultants, and we then become more self-sufficient in terms of supporting that technology going forward.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring in Andrew, in case you might want to say anything on this.
I think Suzanne's covered it really well. We're in the process of putting that support contract in place right now in terms of developing the specification. And I've sat in on meetings with the consultant and gone through it all to understand it. And we will be putting our lead staff on it and then training them up over time.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Dowson.
Technology is a wonderful thing. I'm not a technophobe at all, but I must admit to have variable arguments with AI bots. And we discussed this previously, where we were trying to find one with a Yorkshire accent and couldn't, to great hilarity. But at the end of the day, you know, we are a customer service organisation. Our customers are the residents of Leeds. So going forward, as we introduce the new technologies, which can save time and redirect staff to other jobs that can't be done by technology. So absolutely accept that. But are we going to do customer surveys? I'm sure you do already around AI, because it is quite controversial. You've got to get it right, and it is that getting it right that's important, so people aren't going in circles and feel they're being ignored.
Yeah, we're constantly surveying the user base, which in sort of your customer service context, I suppose, would be our customers, would be the users of those systems. And all the way through the programme, we have done ad hoc surveys about how people are feeling in terms of the transition and the change and what they've seen in terms of, we've done lots of engagement activities in terms of demos. I think definitely in terms of going forward and utilising and harnessing additional capabilities, it is really important to involve the users in terms of how they currently work and what they'd like to see and what they think would make their interaction with the systems and better and easier. So definitely in terms of involving end users at various stages of ongoing development to ensure that what we develop will meet their needs and ultimately will mean that they will use that functionality is incredibly important. And we've already established that, I think, through the initial stages of the programme, is constantly checking in and surveying users about how they're feeling and what they've seen and what if they like what they see. And up to press has been favourable. You know, people and staff particularly are keen to see modern systems and modern ways of working that reflects sort of some of the capabilities that they see, you know, in their home life. But yes, it's a good point, important point that we definitely will build in to ongoing developments and improvements.
It is important that we actually include everybody. And you're right, people come into work and they use technologies, but for older people, for people who don't have the economy, they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have some of the things that we're lucky enough to have. I think we do need to make sure when we're doing these sort of reviews that we do include everybody in the community, and we don't single out people who are good at IT or good on the phone already. And obviously we're looking at disabilities as well. People who have visual or hearing disabilities, how are they accessing the systems?
I think in terms of the systems that we're implementing, they're mainly aimed at staff and staff users and the user base within the council, the kind of back office systems, as it were, and our user base is mainly staff. And we are involving and very much engaged with the Dawn network, you know, to ensure that we develop inclusive systems that everybody can use. Over time, it might be that some of the systems does extend into the customer base. I think particularly when we start looking at how people pay and access and receive online bills and sundry income bills, and how we can look at digital solutions for that. So absolutely, that's at that point we'll engage with our customer services teams and learn from them, I think, about how they go about engaging with customers and the wider user base beyond the council. So yeah, I totally agree. It's really important that we involve everybody.
And just finally, it's, with staff communication as well. A lot of our staff aren't IT based. You know, they're in the parks, making them look lovely. They're taking our rubbish away in bins, and they're not sitting in front of computers. So I think it's vital that we actually make sure that we get to those people as well, and make sure that everybody staff wise feels included in what the council's doing with regard to upgrades and so on.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. And just picking up on a similar theme that Councillor Dowson just explored there. And while you were speaking, I did think to ask ChatGPT how AI could seek to improve public services at Leeds City Council. And many of those were the things that you were talking about. And I should say other large language models are available for anybody who's watching at home, were the things you were talking about. But what has been done in somewhere like Estonia is that they still allow people to access paper-based services if they want to. So they retain that option that's there. Is that something that we will always seek to retain as we go through the core business transformation? So that if somebody wants that option, if they just can't access it, that we would deliver that?
I think in terms of, again, with these being back office systems that are predominantly aimed at staff and the offline staff, our programme aims really to, I guess, to address the fact that there are a significant number of staff that don't have access to digital solutions. So, and we are doing a piece of work really to engage with them about how we can help eliminate that digital divide, as it were, in terms of, you know, that ongoing reliance to paper-based systems, and have access to all the same tools and the same information and easy access to all that everybody else does. So we have committed that where people and users are unable to use digital devices and digital solutions, that we will find a way, obviously, that the service to them is continue to be maintained. But what we have committed to doing is finding ways to bring them into that digital way of working, because otherwise it kind of continues to exacerbate them being left behind in terms of, you know, not getting access to digital systems. So we've done a lot of work with unions and with the staff, engaged with the staff, and we surveyed them about 18 months ago now about what we can do and how we can help them have access to these new digital tools, because it'll be things like, so that they can access pay slips through their mobile phone and have easy access to be able to submit overtime claims, for example, and access to the information that we hold about them. And there was a very positive response, actually, and a high response where they are willing to, where it eases the burden and it helps them undertake their own personal admin, you know, and get easy access to information that is important to them in terms of pay slip information and more comprehensive information about their pay. That there was a survey that indicated a high proportion of those staff would be willing to utilise and access these systems through their own devices. So we're working on that basis and we're doing a lot of engagement work with those frontline services about how we can make that happen. And where they don't have easy access to their own devices, about what we can put in place so they can get easy access. So whether that's a local offices or local depots in having access to devices and laptops or mobile devices, maybe a library, similar what we've set up in terms of libraries for citizens, where you can access, you know, where you can borrow mobile devices. So a similar type of arrangement for staff. Again, so it's not continuing to exacerbate the digital divide, but really how we can include them and help them overcome those barriers. But where it's absolutely necessary and there isn't an alternative, is still having those mechanisms in place where people can still have access to, you know, paper processes.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No, we're happy with the recommendations made out in the report. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to 14, which is the committee's work programme. Liz.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is just the usual standing report of the committee's work programme going forward for this year, and also the members' development plan, which is in line with the SIP for guidance, providing members with core knowledge and experience of the committee. There aren't any major amendments to these reports, just to let you know that in June's committee, Kate raised a really useful human resources presentation, and that has been arranged for members to receive that in March before the annual assurance report of that service comes. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? And they're happy with the work programme to date? Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. That's the end of today's meeting. Next meeting is on the 23rd of September, and it'll be an interesting time for that meeting as well. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.